Hey, what is going on guys? Danny here, welcome back to the channel and I hope you've all been doing well. The RTX 3080 will hit store shelves in just a few days and you're all probably just as excited as I am. With Nvidia showcasing some large performance leaps over their last generation of video cards, there's no doubt that these next-gen RTX 3000 series GPUs will be flying off store shelves. Many of you may even be interested in picking one up for a GPU upgrade, or perhaps interested in building a new gaming PC rig surrounding the RTX 3080. But perhaps you might not be sure in regards to what parts to choose for that build. So in this video, I've comprised a list of parts that you can easily pick up yourself from Amazon in order to complete that awesome gaming rig that comes in at just under $2,000. I decided to stick with just one retailer as it'll make it easy to attain all the parts, and there will be links down below in the video description for all the parts that I mentioned in the video. However, feel free to use something like PC Part Picker to reference prices from other stores of your choosing. With that said, let's get right into this build. For the first part, we've got the CPU, and here I will be choosing the AMD Ryzen 7 3700X. This is a fantastic CPU for the price, as it's got 8 cores with SMT enabled, allowing for 16 threads. Therefore, in regards to gaming performance and even tasks like productivity, streaming, and content creation, this will be a very capable CPU in all of those areas. With 16 threads, you'll be able to ensure that the games you're playing won't have any issues with limited resources, and at higher resolutions like 1440p and 4K, the 3700X shouldn't bottleneck an RTX 3080. Although at 1080p, you'll definitely be a bit more CPU limited, but it shouldn't be anything too drastic, and you'll definitely be able to game at higher refresh rates with no problems. This processor comes in at $299, it comes with a cooler in the box and should pair up nicely with our RTX 3080. You're definitely getting great bang for the buck here. Moving on, I decided to include a CPU cooler with this build as the budget will allow for it, and it should definitely help factors such as thermals and acoustics. The CPU cooler I chose is the NZXT Kraken X53. This is a 240mm all-in-one liquid cooler, which should provide a drastic improvement over the stock Wraith Prism cooler when used on the Ryzen 7 3700X, as when you'll be gaming, this cooler should help keep your temps low, all the while running quiet thanks to those two 120mm fans included with the cooler. Most importantly though, since you'll be running the CPU at lower temps, this should help the 3700X sustain higher clock speeds, which should allow for higher gaming performance and FPS. Aesthetically, the cooler looks great too, as the CPU pump has incorporated this infinity glass design with RGB LEDs. The X53 will come in at $129.99. Now, if you think you'll be fine without an aftermarket cooler and you want to save some money by running with the stock cooler, then that's definitely an option as well. The choice is yours. Now for the motherboard, I opted for MSI's B550 motherboard from their Tomahawk lineup. The Tomahawk boards have always been regarded as some of the best motherboards you can buy on the market, as they offer premium build quality, lots of great features at affordable price points. MSI continues that trend with their B550 Tomahawk, as this board is packing a solid VRM rocking 60 amp power stages, which should be more than enough for even something like a Ryzen 9 3950X, and should give you some assurance for future upgrades. Along with that, you've got high memory overclocking support, which is very crucial for Ryzen systems, plenty of fan headers, PCI Express 4.0 support, so it'll be fully compatible bandwidth-wise for our RTX 3080 and Gen 4 NVMe drives. Now, the reason why I opted for a B550 board as opposed to an X570 board was for a few reasons. One, the B550 boards are just a lot more cost effective, especially for gaming builds where you won't be taking advantage of all those extra PCIe lanes. With that said though, for the average user, you'll still have plenty of options in regards to storage for your build. Build quality wise, as I just mentioned with the VRM design, rear I/O and more, the B550 will practically give you like 90% of the features the X570 board would at a much lower price. You're much better off saving that money and putting it towards your GPU, more storage, or even for games. So at $180, the MSI B550 Tomahawk is an excellent choice that will fulfill all the requirements for this gaming build. Next up, it's only appropriate I talk about my choice for RAM since I just mentioned a motherboard with great memory support. For this component, I've chosen the Crucial Ballistics RGB. This is a 16GB kit with two 8GB DIMMs and will come with a memory overclocking profile at 3600 MHz with 16, 18, 18, 38 primary timings. With this kind of configuration, it should definitely allow our Ryzen CPU to stretch its legs in gaming and therefore boost performance, as Ryzen benefits greatly from higher frequency memory thanks to being able to run its Infinity Fabric clocks at higher speeds while maintaining a 1-to-1 ratio. Latency is also key here, as this kit should help reduce it significantly. As for capacity, 16GB is more than enough for games these days, as I find even the most demanding games aren't needing near that much. Along with that, 16GB should provide you with enough RAM to even use productivity and content creation programs. But if you are serious about that stuff, maybe perhaps bumping up to 32GB could probably go a long way for you. RAM has become quite cheap these days, thanks to an oversupply, and at $88, this kit offers some really good value. Oh, and it's, also got RGB, so it looks nice. Next up, we're going to be looking at our storage options. For the boot drive, we've got an ADATA XPG SX8200 Pro. This drive is rated for very fast sequential read and writes, with speeds of up to 3500 and 3000 megabytes per second respectively. With this drive, it should allow your system to operate in a very snappy manner and decrease load times. Now this is a PCIe Gen 3 drive and not a PCIe Gen 4 drive. Now you might be wondering as to why I didn't go with a PCIe 4.0 drive since we're using a system that has support for those kinds of drives. Well, the simple answer is that as of now, for a gaming rig, you simply don't need it. The cost increase over a Gen 3 drive just isn't worth it since you won't be getting any benefit from it in regards to a gaming scenario besides maybe a couple of seconds of decreased loading times. Yes, we know Microsoft will introduce their direct storage API and Nvidia have RTX IO, which should in theory help leverage devices like your fast NVMe SSDs to boost performance and decrease loading, but until we're seeing a wide variety of games that support that tech, because as of now there's absolutely nothing, I'm going to consider it not needed. So at $134, the 8200 Pro is a fantastic NVMe drive with blazing fast speeds, dedicated DRAM cache, and it'll fit right into one of our available M.2 slots on the motherboard conveniently. As for our secondary mass storage drive, I'll be giving you guys a couple of options here. The first option can be another SSD, except this time we'll go with a 2.5-inch SSD, which is the 1TB Crucial MX500. This drive, while not as fast as an NVMe SSD, can still provide a major boost in regards to decreased load times at the expense of mass storage. For $110, you can get a nice drive with reads of up to 560 megabytes per second, with quality 3D NAND flash and great silicon motion controller, making it a very reliable drive, fitting in nicely with a gaming build. One of the reasons why I would recommend this over a traditional mechanical drive in a gaming build now is because games are getting really big these days with large maps and tons of assets to load, and an SSD will be a much more preferred storage of medium as opposed to a spinner. Now let's say you need a larger storage device because you're going to be recording, streaming, and editing gameplay. Well, in that case I recommend a 2TB Seagate Barracuda for just $55. It's a decent drive for the price, you'll get lots of storage, and you save quite a bit of money there as well. Following all of that, we're going to be talking about the power supply for this build, and this was actually a very tough part to choose, not because I didn't know what to choose. I could have recommended countless power supplies that would accommodate all these components just fine. However, due to the current global health crisis, it seems as though we're going through quite a dire power supply shortage. Just trying to find a good solid unit that was at least around 850 watts from a reputable brand was near impossible, and as you know, when there's a shortage of something with increased demand, prices skyrocket, and power supplies unfortunately aren't exempt from that rule. So with that said, I was able to find a pretty decent unit, and that is a Seasonic Focus GM850. This is an 850 watt 80 plus gold rated unit. It's not the most top of the line unit, but for a build like this should be absolutely fine for running all the components to their full capability. The reason why I went with an 850 watt unit was because the RTX 3080 is a very power hungry card. With a rated TDP of around 320 watts, you can easily expect the card to even exceed that under very demanding loads. And if you're going to be overclocking, that'll give you guys quite a bit of headroom. I'm sure when you guys see the reviews go up, you'll definitely know what I'm talking about. Power consumption figures should be, getting up there. Could I have went with a lower wattage power supply, say around 750 or 650 watts? Probably, but then you'd be pushing that unit out of its efficiency sweet spot curve, and you wouldn't have that much headroom either for future upgrades or any overclocking. Also, this unit is semi-modular, so it should help in regards to cable management. And also, this is very important, you'll be able to run two separate PCIe power cables from the PSU, as this is even recommended by Nvidia for the most stable power delivery. And it's backed by a 7-year warranty from the manufacturer, so you should be covered in case anything goes wrong. A great reliable unit from one of the top manufacturers coming in at $130, which during these circumstances in the PSU market is a very reasonable price. The last component we have is the case, which will be responsible for housing all of these wonderful components, providing ample airflow to keep everything nice and cool. So for the case, really there isn't a set choice here. You can go with whatever suits your needs as long as it can accommodate a full-size ATX board, can accommodate the power supply, can support a long GPU as those RTX 3080s both Founder Edition models and AIBs will be very long since they have big heatsinks to cool the GPUs. But yeah, as long as you're good for dimensions and form factors, you can go with whatever you find appealing aesthetically. Now, I'm an airflow kind of guy. If there's a case that provides a lot of airflow to help keep thermals, I don't care what it looks like, but it's not like, I totally ignore how something will look and, want the most trashiest part. So with all that said, I went with the Cooler Master H500 RGB. Now, this isn't the nicest looking case, but the reason why I chose it is because it can easily support all of our components, and it comes with these two giant 200mm fans, which will provide lots of airflow throughout the system. And what's nice about those fans is that since they're much larger, they can push a lot of air while spinning at relatively low RPMs, as opposed to 3 120mm fans, as this will result in a much quieter system and a cooler system, ensuring you've got plenty of airflow, which will be crucial for this build. As I mentioned, the 3000 series GPUs are power hungry and will run hot due to their high TDPs. You'll want to maximize cooling. Apart from that, it doesn't even look that bad. You've got a nice tempered glass panel, there's a power supply shroud to hide the mess of cables, lots of room to work inside, and more. Also, if you decide to do a custom water cooling loop in the future, this case will be totally viable for that. So for $120, you're definitely getting a lot of bang for your buck here. And the other thing I actually want to mention was that, say you decide to skip out on the CPU water cooler and you decide to stick with the Wraith Prism. In that case, the Wraith Prism will work out just fine. I know in the past I've shown a video where I compared an AIO, a 120mm AIO, significantly outperforming the Wraith Prism, but that was in a very thermally constrained case, which was the Cooler Master Q500L. But in a case like this, where you're going to be getting a lot of airflow, the Wraith Prism really shouldn't have much issue keeping the CPU cool. And finally, last but not least, the RTX 3080. Now, the 3080 will hit store shelves later this week, and that is assuming your local computer parts store will have stock. But with these parts that I mentioned in this build, you'll be able to build yourself an absolute monster of a gaming system. One that can handle gaming at a variety of resolutions, whether that's 4K, ultra-wide 1440p, or even do high refresh rate 1080p gaming. Anything you throw at it, really, this rig will be able to handle it just fine. Along with that, productivity and, content creation, if you want to make YouTube videos, this gaming rig will be totally capable of doing all of that just fine. When we take into account all the parts and their respective prices, you end up with a system that's around $1,900 US. But when you take into account the price of Windows and such, you'll be at that $2,000 mark. Obviously, with regional taxes and shipping costs, it could be a bit more, or even it could be a bit less. So your mileage may vary there. But for $2,000, like I mentioned, this is going to be one killer gaming build. Now, if you do want to save some money and decide to skip the aftermarket cooler and just go with that 2TB hard drive for storage, then this build comes up to around $1,700, which is also a very viable choice. If you want, you can either use that extra money saved towards, a more higher quality motherboard like an X570 chipset, you could use it towards more RAM, or you could just, save the money and use it towards games and other software. So that is the $2,000 RTX 3080 build that I want to go over and recommend. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, if you're interested in making this gaming PC build and want to purchase the parts, you can use my affiliate link down in the video description. I hope you guys found this video to be informative and helpful. Let me know your thoughts down below. Check out the video description on ways to support the channel and for my other videos. If you guys are interested in more content like this, then make sure you subscribe. Thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one.